Welcome into the SorareData NBA show, episode 2. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdino on Sorare, Andrew M. Laird on Twitter. Joined today by an OG of the NBA NFT space, the founder of the First Mint, LG Doucet. LG, thank you so much for coming on. I have like so many questions that I didn't give any of them to you ahead of time, but I think you're perfectly prepared, my guest, to answer all of them because Sorare NBA is new. You are new to Sorare. You are not new to Top Shot, which is something that I think a lot of people are coming over from, not necessarily coming over, also adding to their portfolios. But firstly, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. And you're right. I am well prepared to improvise a show. My mom made me take improv classes when I was like in grade 9,
There we
so
go.
or ninth grade. So it's just I've been ready for years, man. Been ready for just any questions you got. Just throw them at me, and I'm ready to rumble.
Yeah, I'll be honest to let people behind the curtain a little bit. I really try not to overly plan streams or podcasts because I feel like the authenticity that you get when you watch them or listen to them, when it's not like somebody like, okay, we have to get through section 1, section 2, section 3. And like, if section 1's really good, and then you're like, all right, that was great, but we're going to cut this off halfway through because we want to get to section 2. So I realize that may put at least you in a weird spot since you have no idea what's coming, but I think we'll be all right. But firstly, when were you kind of made aware of Sorare NBA, and like what were your initial, like even before you started playing, like what were your initial kind of thoughts about it?
Great question. So I heard from somebody tipped me off like maybe a few hours before the announcement that they're like, yo, just so you know, Sorare is about to announce NBA. And I was like, and I think they meant it as like, this is going to mess up your world, you know? And I was like, oh, great. I was like, that sounds fantastic because, when I started my NFT journey, was probably about middle 2020 when I started to get curious, and it was a slow run up from there until the big wave of 2021.
Yeah.
I definitely looked at Sorare, but I'm not a football guy. You know what I mean? Like I'm just not. I just don't follow enough, and there's a few too many leagues for me, and it's just not up there. So I was like, this looks cool, but I'm not ready to jump in. And there's other stuff. I'm more keen. I was keen on like the Top Shot, but I was also keen on like I was buying like Sandbox land and going to like really weird like metaverse meetups and crypto voxels and just trying to understand like what was going on, because back then the NFT space was like, it was like a little high school. Basically it was like the same couple hundred people. Some of them were new like me, and there was a few big players, but they were more like the quarterback of the football team. It was like, oh, do you know this guy? But it's like you're not a big deal anywhere outside of this weird little circle, right? So I looked at Sorare just as I did it at any other project, and I was like, this looks interesting, but I'm not into soccer, so I'm not going to look at it, right? So I ignored it for a long time, and I have no regrets over that. I don't know what I would have bought because I just didn't have enough knowledge. But when the NBA thing came out, I was very keen to check it out because I've played a lot of NBA fantasy in the past. Not so much DFS, but a little, head to head in different leagues, and done relatively well. So I was pretty keen to like get in there, and it's been fun. I've been enjoying it. I think the platform is awesome. I think I really enjoy and also kind of loathe the auction format because it's a little too like addictive for me. Which I know is something that definitely like tech companies like love to hear, that you're like, I'm so addicted to your website. I have to check it 18 times a day. That's fine. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. It's just, it kind of sucks me in a little bit too much. And, but my impressions have been good largely from the moment that I stepped into it. Let's say.
Cool. Yeah. It's funny how you kind of phrase that, like that they gave you a heads up as if like everything was going to be bad after that. And
it's just like I'll tell you, Andrew, as well, just so for a bit of context there around the First Mint. In the early Top Shot days, when things kind of started blowing up for Top Shot, we were like a community and info source and a podcast, but we also would like get like people would send us information that wasn't public yet of like which new moments had been minted,
Yeah.
and we would put it on Twitter, and it's like it would kind of ruffle feathers where people would be like, how does the first mint have this info, and
Sure.
so we for the first like little bit, let's say the first half of 2021, we developed a reputation for having kind of secret info about Top Shot or something that's going on. So to this day, because of that, people still send us stuff like that as though it's gonna be this shock. Because back then it was like, we'd tweet, be like, "There's a new LeBron moment," and people would freak out. They'd be like, "Oh fuck," like it just people would snap. It's a way less like that on Top Shot now. Like it is for all NFTs. For all
Sure.
NFTs, there's very few there are very few shocking moments like that. Let's say for something so minute, but people still kind of approach us that way. They're like, "Yo, I got this scoop for you. Like, you should tweet it." Or like people are like, "Did you see what this person said in a Discord? Why aren't you guys talking about that?" Right? Like it's so we get people have that expectation, which is great. But yeah, that's where that came from like somebody trying to pass along the info. I was like, okay, cool, great, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that.
No, I don't even. So it was part of that, but the other part was
Yeah,
kind of like how somehow the introduction of Sorare NBA was going to be like a huge hit to Top Shot.
right. Yeah,
And to be honest, like I don't own any moments. Like I never really got into Top Shot, partly because it took like a pretty big leap of faith for me just to get in it so rare for the NFTs. Like
yeah,
NFTs made no sense to me. And it took me a while to kind of accept them, if that's even the
yeah,
phrase. But
yeah.
the the more now that they're both here, it seems like they're so different that this idea that like you should only do one, like, oh, I only do Top Shot, so I'm not going to buy any so rare cards, or like I play so rare, so like there's no reason for me to buy Top Shot. Like, yes, they're both like NBA NFTs, but the platforms and just like the way that you interact with these things, it just seems so different.
Right.
And maybe it's because I only have access or experience in one of them, but like you had this Twitter thread recently that you were like the things that you like and don't like so far about So Rare,
Yeah.
and that just like jumped out at me. Like you can do both. Like nobody's telling you can only play one, and I feel like slowly we're getting to that point where people are like, oh, I can just like own the moments I want and go play this fantasy game or collect the So Rare cards that I want. And there was this weird like maybe the companies are going to battle a little bit, but like obviously that's silly. Like you can do both.
Well, and that's potentially, we're still so early, and it's so typical to say, like in the NFT and Web3 space, but that's also like potentially the future of how leagues license their IP, right? It's like right
Sure.
now we're like, oh, are these products competing? Like, do you want to spend $200 on moments, or do you want to spend $200 building a team? And for all you know, in 10 years, you're gonna have 10 different platforms of NBA Web3 that you have to
Yeah.
decide where you want to put your money and which one you want to interact with, right? Like it's not all inclusive, right? And even the NBA, I've been wanting to get somebody from the NBA blockchain team on our show for a really long time because I want to understand what their strategy is. Because also, I don't know if you caught this, but last April they also released this extra like generative collection of players called the Association that was like
Yes.
pretty messy in terms of its launch. The contract got exploited, and also like is kind of a questionable art. And I'd be very vocal about that. And I just want to know the NBA. Even this is like I want to know. We all have opinions of like should Sorare and Top Shot compete. I want to know what the NBA thinks. Like, is the NBA just putting its license on the table, saying like, all right, hungry hippos, come get it, and then whoever can build the best product that breaks through, great, we'll renew the license with you when the time comes, right? Like, is that the strategy, or are they just trying? They're like, we're gonna do collectibles, we'll do DFS, we're gonna do weird shitty art, we're gonna do some other freaking VR. Watch the Warriors game in VR. You get an NFT, like watch to earn type stuff. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I just want to know what that strategy is because inevitably that's what's informing a lot of these products that we love, right? And what that direction is for them into the future.
What's the reaction though if they're like, yeah, we're just going to do everything and see what makes us the most money?
I mean, that's kind of what the NBA is. Like we've been doing on our show, if anybody's interested, we've been kind of like looking more at like the business side of sports and crypto in the last couple of weeks. We just kind of revamped it. Comes out every Monday mornings, the first minute. You can look it up on iTunes or podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. And we looked recently, like the first two stories we did was one about Steph Curry and his like Under Armour shoe deal and how they have like a huge metaverse play kind of on the table. The second one was
Curryverse?
Chicago.
Is that what it was called?
They just filed the patent for Curryverse
Yeah.
actually, yeah. But they've already released some stuff when he broke the all-time 3-point record, and he's got like a really great lifetime deal with them. But the second show we did was about the Chicago Bulls, and that kind of gave us the opportunity to dive into how the NBA makes money and specifically how they've made money under Adam Silver. And it's really astonishing. Like Silver basically like renegotiated every single contract they had, like renegotiated TV contract, kicked Adidas out the door and brought Nike in for like 10 times more money. Like he's basically been just like a genius of like finding areas where there is no advertising or where the deal could be like 2 or 3 times more and just juicing it.
Yeah.
And that's why you have advertising on logos now. Like the advertising on logos or advertising on jerseys, sorry, logos on jerseys. That's worth like already last year, that was worth like $200 million to the NBA just to for people to splash a little thing on, right? So already you're seeing values rise due to like Adam Silver's reign of like, let's find new mediums to explore. So I'm not surprised that they were early around that time, right? They started thinking about NFTs maybe 4 or 5 years ago, or at least crypto. I'm not surprised that they want to maximize revenue there, right? And I think that that's a really it's a brilliant strategy. You know,
Yeah.
that's how you make money. Sports leagues are incredibly valuable IP these days. Some of the most valuable, you know, that there is. And that's, you know, it's a great move to be so forward in Web3 and to kind of maybe see, like we're saying, like give the license a bunch of people and see who does the best with it, and then take that and integrate that into your league.
I remember when they started talking about like the possibility of putting like sponsor logos on jerseys. And it was one of those things that like it came out in a way where it was very clear, like the decisions have been made, they're going to do this, but like, let's put the rumor out there, see like what the reaction is. And now I didn't grow up like following soccer, to be honest. Like I picked up soccer much later in life, but like before they started putting sponsor logos on jerseys, like I had gotten into soccer and I'm like, there are logos on jerseys, on uniforms, like all over the place. Like you recognize teams from like the sponsor. And so when it was like, oh, they're thinking of putting like, you know, whatever logo, FedEx logo on the Grizzlies jersey. And everyone is like, oh, they can't do that. And I'm like, they're definitely doing that. Like that is like essentially free money for the NBA and for all the owners. And like, if you think it's only going to be one, then you can think that, but they're going to have a few, there's different places you can put them. I mean, it started with the WNBA. They had them there first. And then I remember when they did with baseball, and it was like, you could never put a sponsor logo on a baseball uniform, but you go to a baseball game and they're everywhere in the stadium. Like there is not like a piece of real estate in a stadium that doesn't have a logo. But then they got this deal with Nike. And it's like, oh, well, Nike's going to make the uniforms and they'll just put a check on it. But that's not really like a sponsored deal. It's just like, I'm like, that's exactly what this is.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of
so
course.
like, obviously we're moving in that direction. And yeah, I think the NBA figured out a way to maximize it.
I think the other thing that maybe we're not aware of that's happened though in the last like 10 to 15 years is that content is everywhere now. Like content is the most valuable thing you can have. That's why we literally every day witness the battle of the streaming services. It's like everybody's making their own content now. Apple, Netflix, Disney, everybody is this massive race of like who can own that content, right? And that started through social media and everything when we kind of just went digital, we got broadband. But what matters, what's really important there for sports, and I think the NBA has realized, is rather than be incredibly restrictive with your IP and to like not let people post it to YouTube, you know what I mean? Like, no, let make it kind of permissionless. Like, don't be too strict on that, and then maximize how much the content is worth to advertisers. So it's like rather than be like, hey, you can only watch NBA highlights on the YouTube channel. No. Let people use it on Instagram. Let other YouTubers, let people make breakdown videos, and then add like make sure that like every time they're using that IP, that it's chock full of ads that you're selling to people, and then use those metrics to sell the ads for higher, right? Like something, I'll give you an example. Like if you go on Instagram and you want to follow like NBA highlights, you probably follow like Sideline Sources, House of Highlights. There's all these like massive media companies that have been built literally on just repurposing NBA footage.
Yeah.
And that's the NBA to me loves that. It's like, yes, please create like these little fandom outposts of our content so that more people can see it. Like, absolutely do that free marketing for us, right? So I think NFTs are just another extension of that. It's like, yes, please, like you're selling the same shit that people look at online for free and gamifying it. Like, that's brilliant. So like I think that's like it obviously it all comes down to revenue, but I think it's being done in a really smart way. And maybe we can bring it all the way back, Andrew, to what we were saying about, like, can people enjoy both platforms? Here's a question for you, actually.
Yeah.
Have you ever bought anything on Top Shot?
Not one.
What have you checked out the site? Like tell me about your experience there. Have you almost bought something, you were annoyed at loading your credit card, you don't want to do it? Like what has been your like how far along are you in the journey, if we're looking at your web activity?
So I think I initially became aware of Top Shot probably like everyone, like winter of 20 to 21, probably the
Yeah.
January, February 2021. I think that's when it was. And there were a few guys who were big in the DFS space, and I was like big in the DFS at the time, who were buying moments. And it was one of these that they were like, I remember I forget who it was. Maybe it was Davis Maddock. Like bought a
Yes.
piece of I don't know if it was the Morant highlight or it was a LeBron, whatever it was, and he was like, "Yeah, I spent like $5,000 on this moment with somebody else. I don't know if that was the amount, but the amounts were crazy." And then they were like,
Yeah.
I remember so many people that they were like, "Yeah, I think it's a really long-term hold." And so I bought this thing for like $1,000, and then like 3 weeks later, they sold it for 30,000. And I'm like, was that that's the long-term hold? And they were like, but
It's
like,
pretty long in NFTs, man.
right. So I was
It's a long
quickly
time.
learning what a long-term hold meant in NFTs. But
Yeah.
I did like sign up. Like I get Top Shot emails, and I remember signing up for I was like in the line for a drop, and then literally like something. I was one of those people who like had to drop out of it, and then like I couldn't get it, and it was less of like me not. Well, it was the way that I felt about NFTs at the time, that like
Right.
I just didn't understand why they had value. And it took
Yeah.
me a while to kind of move to the idea of it, like, honestly, it was like, it doesn't matter if I think this thing has value if a lot of other people do.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest reason why I didn't get into Top Shot is it was not that people were like presenting it to me, but the way that it came to me was, you can buy these things and sell them for a lot more. And this like idea of collecting them
Yeah.
wasn't about collecting them. It was about buying them and flipping them. And that just like wasn't something I was interested in. Like I totally understood why people got into it. But then as this was happening, I was really getting into Sorare. And the Sorare scarcity thing made sense to me. And I was like, okay, they're going to make 100 of these kind, 10 of these, that have the unique, and they're not going to do any more of those. And I was like, okay, I get that. And then I saw it on Top Shot. They were like, okay, here's this moment. We're only going to mint however many there were. And where it lost it for me with Top Shot was comparing it to Sorare, that like I knew there was only going to be a certain number of messy cards every year. And with Top Shot, I knew how many of like one specific LeBron moment would be made, but like there could be a new LeBron moment tomorrow. And
then they just kept doing that shit, Andrew. They just kept making more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, if you were selling them like they were selling them,
Yeah.
you would make more too. Like I totally understood that, but it also
Yeah.
felt like a total misunderstanding of scarcity. And that like a huge part of these NFTs was that they were presumably scarce. And
It
it
got away
became
from
less
just
that they
being a
were scarce
collectible.
and more that they were
Yeah.
like traceable.
Yeah.
And I just never got
Yeah.
in.
I mean, that's a really accurate depiction of it, man, from somebody who never got in. Like that's pretty dead on. I do think like I don't know if it was intentional what happened. Like I don't think anybody intended for NFTs to happen the way they did, but
Yeah.
it was largely like DFS people that came in, mainly through Jonathan Bales's blog post that
It
kind of
was definitely
initiated
Bales
things
who got
where
me in.
him and a group of guys bought the number one John Morant
Yeah.
for $35,000. And that was a huge thing. But then it brought in people looking for edges, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's ever what was the intended target demo. Is, you know, Bales is great, super smart guy. I read a lot of his stuff, but most of his advice comes down to like, look at what the game is and then find a way to play it differently than everybody else does,
Yep.
right? And it's just like, that's great advice for NFTs, absolutely. But is it great advice for something that's supposed to be like, hey, like you really like the NBA? Well, wouldn't you like to collect the best highlights ever,
Yeah.
you know, in a way that's authenticated online, so your actual little card never gets burned or nothing happens to it? It's like, no, that's not supposed to be a game of edges. And inevitably now you fast forward, it's been almost 2 years since that, Andrew. It's been
Yeah.
almost 2 years since that. Like we're coming up on it. And no matter what Top Shot does, it that initial surge still lingers. You know what I mean? Inevitably, no matter how many good things they do, platform updates, whatever new things they put out, they burn moments now. It doesn't matter. You'll still have tons of people who have accounts where they bought some freaking the worst like Ish Smith freaking highlight for $200 and now it's worth $2. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and you'll have that in their history printed on the freaking blockchain, because that's blockchain. You know, you can't escape your old transactions. That inevitably is what's going to be there, and everybody knows that. So that really like permeates in the sentiment. And that's where, you know, I don't think it was ever really going to be like So Rare versus Top Shot,
Mm-hmm.
but inevitably I think because of that, there's a lot of people in the Top Shot community who see it as that, whether they're Top Shot pro or against, right? It's like I think people are always going to see it as like, when is Top Shot going to finally freaking break out of this thing that they're stuck in? And it's like, I don't know, man. You know, like I don't know how I don't know if they ever will, because then even people like you, Andrew, you know, you're there's not even like a new story I can tell you about why you should come to Top Shot. What you said is accurate to what happened, and that is still the battle they face right now, where it's like in the third season last year they minted moments to 60,000. Like what? Like that's like, come on, you know what I mean? So it's just like there's you know, you're shaking your head. So that's a good example where it's like, until there is some vastly like different value prop for people like you to come back to it, that you're like, oh, you know what, that does sound cool, I'll come check it out. I don't think, you know, I think it's going to be hard for them to maybe not bring in new people, but to bring in people that know about it and just haven't spent money yet.
Yeah. So the Ish Smith thing is great because it kind of moves to the Sorare part of, I think they've done a really good job of making players like Ish Smith considerable in terms of,
Yes.
I might buy a card like that. Like, so much of Sorare in football and in baseball, but we mostly see it. I mean, we see it in both. It's mostly in football, which is now trickling down to the others. Is fundamentally Sorare is a fantasy game, and so you're going to buy cards that help you in this game, and it doesn't work as much in football or in baseball. But the way that they've designed the basketball game is like, like I say this with both, it's not even pride, but it's definitely more shame, that so I own two Jonathan Kuminga limited cards.
Okay.
Like, nobody should own a Jonathan Kuminga card. Like, that's not a card that like you join a collector platform and you're like, that I want one of those. And I have two of them. But because it's like kind of helpful in the game, and like we don't necessarily, I don't want to go into like the aspects of why he's
Good or
sometimes
bad.
valuable in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that the way that they've designed this game would makes me want to buy that card. Whereas for straight collectibles, like the way that I view Top Shot, like I'm not going to buy a Kuminga moment if he even has one. So like Yeah, so I think Sorare has done like a pretty good job with that, and you kind of mentioned that in your Twitter thread, just of like how the
Yeah.
the game really like makes these guys more or less valuable. So like, was that something
Absolutely.
that you liked? Like, do you continue to like that?
Oh,
That you're buying guys
so
that like,
I've always listen. Okay, so my theory on like sports NFTs is that it should add a layer to your fandom. Like it should make watching the game, going to the game, all aspects of you caring in any way about the sport. It should make that better, right? It shouldn't
mhm,
shouldn't make it more stressful. Let's put it that way. It should make you more mad. Like I'm sure there's maybe people now who watch the NBA and they have PTSD from Top Shot and they're like, "Fuck it, Top Shot," like some garbage play happens, and they'll probably make that into a moment because it sucks, or when they see Ish Smith, they're triggered. They're like, like I,
mhm.
I lost so much money on Ish Smith. Um, but what I was gonna say is I think these things should enhance, right? So to me, something like So Rare, and also what they've been doing on NFL All Day, which is also a Dapper product, to me changes the way that I consume the game.
Okay.
It does, like, so for sure for So Rare, I'm like, okay, like what shit bench player is going to get some minutes this weekend, right? And has like a score, or what do you guys call like the last 10, the L10 or whatever? What's the generally used term for that? Is there a
We don't
term?
have one yet. It's really frustrating too. Like I'm basically using an
Okay.
L10 average, but like the
Okay.
one that gets me is like the cap. I'm not sure what to call the cap yet
Cap.
because like
Okay.
you can't call it a salary cap because you
Yeah.
can spend all you want. But yeah, L10
Yeah.
average basically.
Okay, I'll just call it the L10. So it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, that to me already is like, okay, like, yes, like I know that like Luca and Giannis and everybody's going to go off at almost any game they have.
yeah,
That's great. But now I get to think about like, okay, what weird shit bench player that's only played like 3 games this season, who's going to get some minutes now that,
yeah.
like when Lillard got injured, it's like, okay, who's going to fill those minutes and has an L10 that's like 3, right? And that to me is like, cool. Like it's actually forcing me to learn about some of the more random players. And that to me is like, that's good. That's what the NBA wants, is for me to care. Like I'm a Raptors fan. So it's like the NBA wants me to care about the shittiest bench player on the Houston Rockets. You know what I mean? Like a team so far away and
Yeah.
a non-competitive team. They want me to care about that. And that's good. And they want me to spend money on that. Like that to me is a really great trick to pull. And a variety, that's just one type of edge, but tons of others I'm sure that we could come up with. Um, what I will say, and this is kind of listening to you talk about Top Shot, and also seeing a comment here in the chat about the points you made, Andrew, being the reason why this guy Mark stayed away from Top Shot. That to me actually kind of gave me an interesting thought, that it's like if Top Shot was really okay, good. I won't say that's not good. I think if you came about Top Shot right now and you found it as a platform, I think it'd be really great because it's really
Mhm.
well polished. It's beautiful. The idea of it does make sense. So it's a good. I still say it's a good product. Um, but if the sentiment was stronger in Top Shot and Top Shot was thriving and people were excited for pack drops and there wasn't all these past issues of like supply and people were mad, if it was like what you would consider a thriving product from a sales standpoint, volume standpoint, and sentiment standpoint, I actually think that would be good for So Rare. I actually think that both of these products doing well is productive for both. Like I think they cross pollinate. That it's like the more you're getting people into like NBA and buying NBA NFTs, the more they're going to want to buy NBA NFTs. Like I like that. That's kind of how I feel about it, because it's like right now that's what I'm doing. It's like I wake up in the morning, I look at my Sorare lineup and I'm like, okay, shit. Keldon Johnson didn't play last night. Totally destroyed my week for
Same.
the rare contender tournament. Like just obliterated any chance I had. But it's like, so I'm looking at that. I'm like, okay, like who else can I pick up? Like who had a good night last night and their L10 won't change too much? Who's going to get minutes? And then I flip over to Top Shot and I'm like, okay, cool. They're doing a crafting challenge, which is you burn like 10 moments or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. Do I have those in my collection? Do I have doubles of those to burn for this new one? Cool, I do. And I go and do that. And I'm like, okay, cool. I have 2 different things I can do after watching my NBA games. And I like that. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think if they both do well, they can actually work together with the idea that they're distinctly different products. Top Shot just has to figure out what's going to make it, what's going to kind of be their solve.
Caring about guys I don't want to say you shouldn't care about, but that you never thought you would care about is like such a
Yeah,
huge, so rare thing, to the point where
I can
it,
imagine.
it happens a lot with soccer where you're
Yeah.
like I live in the US. I mostly like when I started watching
Where do you
soccer,
live?
it was like
Where do
the
you live, Andrew?
Right outside of New York. So I'm like, I was
Okay,
born and
nice. So
raised
what are
in New
you
York.
what are you a fan of?
I'm a Knicks fan.
NBA, Knicks fan, NFL,
Knicks, Yankees, Jets, and
Yankees.
Rangers. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
There we
Nice.
go.
Okay.
Right. And the poster behind me of the dunk, John Starks, in
Oh
back
yeah,
when they
yeah.
were good.
That
Back
should have
when
given it
they were
away. Yeah.
good, but basketball was
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Okay.
So
Cool.
so with soccer, it's kind of like, so I grew up not following soccer, and then when I got into it, it
Yeah.
was like I would watch the English Premier League and the Champions League.
Yeah.
I got into MLS, and I started playing Sorare, and then all of a sudden I find myself like, does anyone have a stream to a J League game in Japan at 5 o'clock this morning? And part of you is just like, what am I doing? And the other part of me is like, seriously, where is the stream? Like, can I
Yeah.
please get the stream?
Yeah.
And so that's totally translated for me to NBA, where
Yeah.
because of the Knicks, I stopped loving the NBA. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm 41.
Mm-hmm.
When I was like in like early teens, high school age, were these teams like Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Charles. Like, I loved those teams.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, the basketball was so bad. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
the younger people, like those games would literally end like 81-79, and you'd be like,
Oh
that was
yeah.
such a great game.
Yeah.
It was just awful basketball. Like, so, and then the Knicks got really, really
Different than
bad.
today.
Was that
Different than today.
right? That's a halftime score now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then the Knicks got so bad that like I just like was like, I can't watch this team anymore, and I just like stopped watching the NBA. And I went to Villanova, and a few Villanova guys have made the NBA,
Yeah.
and now like Jalen Brunson plays for the Knicks. So like it all, everything like started to like get me to be like, all right, maybe I should watch more of the Knicks.
Yeah.
And then NBA launches, and now I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna watch this Rockets Grizzlies game, definitely, because like, who knows what I'm gonna see.
Yeah.
And I just want, and in terms of like fandom, like we were talking about before, like the NBA wants new ways to like get people to take in their product.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in on the NBA
Yeah.
again, and it's
Yeah.
great. And like the players are better than they've ever been, and I'm like invested in it. But I'm also that's emotionally invested, but also I guess financially, if we're gonna consider that for these Sorare cards. But like, I'm
100%.
in, and like that's what I like the most about like the Sorare platform is it's not just like, all right, let me just make sure Giannis has a good game. Like, I need to find out like everyone else who does, and that's just, I like to nerd out on stuff like that, and so it like
You're
helps
good.
that this is a game where like if you like to nerd out on this stuff, there are a lot of opportunities to do that in Sorare.
And okay, two things. One, I'll say Kyle Lowry is Villanova alum, also the greatest Raptor of all time. So we'll say that. That's great.
I'll see
That
you at the
used
Hall of
your
Fame induction.
yeah. So we miss him. But and the other thing I'll say is that yes.
Nope, I think we lost LG. Nope.
Am I still here? Oh, okay.
Dropped you there
Okay.
for a second.
Yeah,
Right.
I was like, all right.
You were like one thing, and then it left. So.
Yeah, the one thing you should know that's really what you should buy right now. No, is that like there is a point in time last season where Top Shot had like people really watching each game because they would do challenges like, okay, whoever has the top 3 players in rebounds tonight, you're going to need their moments to blah 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 blah. So it was like, they still kind of do that now, but I think a bit of the luster is gone. The problem right now is that I think there would be a lot of like game theory around even just the supply of moments.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that even for the top players, you like the oversupply is still an issue. And I don't mean it as in like they have a moment that has 60,000. I mean it as in they have 8 moments that are all under $4. You know what I mean? So it's almost like if there's only one that was $4, it's like, okay, there's a really like, this is the shit one. Everybody knows this is the shit set. You don't need it. It's just kind of the pennies of the game. But then it jumps to like $100 is the next one. Then it'd be like, okay, I understand the hierarchy of how these things work. Yeah. Right. Same with even if it's not fantasy building, it's like Sorare is the same thing though. It's like limited, rare, super rare, unique, right? And it's just or common, I guess, as well, though you can't trade it. But you look at somebody like a Jason Tatum. I'm just looking at his moments right now, and it's like they're all wonderful moments, but he has 8 that are No, he has 8 that are $5 or less, right? So even if you come in, even from a collectible standpoint, even if you're not trying to play gamification, if you're coming in and you're like, I love Jason Tatum, he's going to win so many MVPs and titles just like when he hits his prime next year or whatever old he is, whatever your theory is on Jason Tatum, you look and you're like, oh, okay, but he's kind of worthless on Top Shot. That's the thing, right? It's like he doesn't his value as a player is not being reflected on the platform, right? And that's the part where it's like, doesn't matter if it's collectibles or it's fantasy or whatever, however else you design your NFT system or your collectibles, there still has to be a hierarchy that makes sense to the fan, right? So it's like the fact that Jason Tatum has 8 moments that are worth $5 or less, and so does Christian Wood, is like, okay, well, yes, like that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
It's like if Christian Wood has 8 moments that are worth $5 or less, Tatum's got to have, he can't have as many. So that's where actually I don't even think Wood has as many moments as Tatum does. So no, he doesn't. So there's 4 moments for Wood that are worth $5 or less, and then it jumps to 59. So that doesn't even make sense from a supply standpoint. That's like, why are there more worthless Tatum cards than there are Christian Wood cards? Right. And it's like, that's the part where it's like, doesn't matter what the platform is supposed to do, the utility, whatever. So you go meet Magic Johnson, which happened to some people recently. For the masses, that's the part that will never make sense. And until that's fixed, doesn't matter what system they build. It's always going to be looked at, I think, in the same way that you and some people in your community see it.
So that reminded me of basically 2 things that I felt about Top Shot that kind of kept me from jumping in. That I probably should have mentioned before. The first was, and I'm stealing this line from somebody, and I can't remember who, but I can't imagine only one person has said it this way. But it felt like Top Shot went from selling moments to selling things that happened. And that like a bounce pass assist is something that happened, but I'm not sure that's like worth money to own. And
absolutely.
So that's kind of like what put me off of it. Like people would open packs and they were like, oh yeah, I have this block shot. And I was like, oh, is it like really great? And they were like, it's a block shot from, Clint Capella. And I'm like, oh, okay. That sounds fun. But the other was
no, it doesn't.
Trying to be nice to my friends.
No, it sounds terrible.
But so the other one was, it felt like the collections. Is that what they called them? Like the competitions, basically, to like collect whatever you need. It felt like
the challenges. They're called challenges.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Collect these 8 cards to get whatever.
Yeah. So the challenges felt less like a challenge, really, and more just like, go buy these 8 things and we'll give you something else. And that didn't seem like I'm not winning anything. I'm just like getting something because I bought something. Like I'm basically buying the new thing, but I happen to be one of the few people who got it. So like so everything that I like consider about Top Shot, I compare to Sorare. Like just because I started on Sorare and I understood Sorare. And so it was like, oh, you buy these cards and you can win other cards and you can use those same cards to win again and again and again if you want. Yeah. And with Top Shot, it was like, buy these 8 things and we'll give you this other thing. And then next time you buy 8 other things and we'll give you this thing. And like, it's like, I get why that works. It just didn't work for me. And so like, that's like, again, like why, one of the reasons why I didn't get into it. But there's definitely a cross here where like at one point you're going to have to buy that Ish Smith moment to get something else. And if Ish Smith at an L10 of 1 and he's going to play 20 minutes tonight, I'm going to go out and buy an Ish Smith card, like, so it's like it's still there. Like that idea of like, I'm only going to buy cards of players that I really like and are going to be great. And it's like, if you want to play this game, you're going to have to like branch out a little bit and basically buy stuff you don't want to buy.
Absolutely. You know, and that's actually one of the biggest initial bull run pieces of Top Shot was the value or the story behind some of the moments. Right. And even, you know, I was doing the podcast and I went from like, hey, I'm just gonna do the podcast, maybe like 10 people listened to it, to like a month later being the person, one of the people who's going on all these other shows to talk about what's
Yeah.
so special about Top Shot, which was fun and insane. And that was one of the things I would say, right? And that was one of the value props was like, hey, listen, like there's this time a couple months after Kobe Bryant died, where LeBron does this dunk where he steals the ball and then he does like he
The
imitates
Kobe dunk.
Kobe at the other end of the court, and it's so special, you know. And hey, do you remember watching the last game before the pandemic started? Vince Carter takes his last shot. Trae Young feeds him the ball. They know that the season's been canceled. He knows it's going to be his last game. It's way too soon because he thought he still had 2 months to play,
Mm-hmm.
and he nails this 3-pointer, and it's so special. You know, it'd be like, you got to go get these things, man. You know, and then now it's like, literally while you're saying that, I went and looked at like, what's the floor, and the like, there's a bunch of $2 moments. And the one that came up is like a Patrick Beverly layup in the bubble. It's like, I'm good. I'll never ever want that. Like, and no, neither will any NBA
No.
fan. And that's the thing, right? Is you got to get back to being like, hey, like these are the like these are, or even literally the freaking thing that's on your poster behind you, man. If that shit came out and there weren't all these problems, you would run there to buy that, right? But you don't, and it's not out there.
Yeah, if it was there, I actually might run out and buy that one. Like
if they came out with it now, for sure, but it's like you'd be more compelled to do it if you weren't aware of if all these issues didn't exist, right? And you weren't afraid that you might end up in your pack instead of getting that one by like you're trying to get that one in your pack, but you'd end up with a who knows what, man. They've released some other, like they call it the set they call for historical stuff is called Run It Back. And they released like 86, 87 season stuff recently to
I remember
celebrate
seeing
like
that. Yeah.
Magic Johnson and stuff. And it's like great. Like you know, you do the marketing with like, hey, Magic Johnson, but then it's like some of the other players in there is like, yes, if you were really into the NBA then,
Mm-hmm.
yes, might be a little nostalgic for you, but to people today, it's like, no, I don't want these guys. Like there's
I
nobody.
yeah.
And then you get disappointed that you're like, I didn't want to pull this guy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want, like, sure, you know what, Charles, okay, I'll give you some of the players in there. Charles Oakley also played for the Raptors, classic player for sure,
Yeah.
right? Moment going for $5.
What is he doing in the moment?
Great question. Let's see. It's very blurry. He is.
TV was blurry
It's a
back then.
layup. It's a layup. Man, you're right. The NBA is so terrible back then. What are they even doing? He's just doing this where he's like jumping in between like 6 guys, just doing this like 3 times until it goes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Who is there's a super random guy in here that we made fun of. Forgot who it was. The guy I'd never heard of. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. That it's just like it's still like a bit of an oversupply thing.
I was talking to who was I on? Oh, it was with John Nellis, who you know, whose show
Yeah,
you were
John.
on. So
Yeah,
I was talking to John on a stream recently about this play,
yeah.
and he had absolutely no idea who John
Of course
Starks
not.
was, which like
No,
there's no reason for somebody like John to
he's
know.
adorable.
But I was like, oh, I'm just going to go on YouTube and like send him the highlight of this. And it may as well have been filmed in 1942. Like
Oh yeah.
the just highlights from what is this, 1993. And I definitely bought this poster in 1993. And so like, yeah, if you make, I would like them to somehow like use AI to make these highlights in 4K so that I don't have to like squint to make sure that it's actually John Starks dunking. Makes you realize how
Absolutely.
bad TV was back then.
Oh yeah. Hey, here's a question for you actually. Well, I'm talking to the, you know, people that know their way around the platform. We're on what week are we on right now? Week 6, week 5, week 4?
We
Where are we
are
at?
in 4.
We're in week 4 right now, so week 5 starts next week. There's new tournaments. I've spent a bit of money on the platform. I've still got like maybe half of what I said I would spend kind of waiting. What's the play? Like, what are we not thinking about right now, Andrew, from somebody who knows how these, you know, you've watched them or you did some soccer, you watch them roll out MLB. Like what should I be thinking about right now besides trying to pick up some low L10s that are going to have big games? That's obvious. But in terms of like supply coming out, like some stuff I bought, obviously the value's down from when I bought it, which is normal because more supply came out or the player sucks now. there's more tournaments coming? Like what is kind of some of the alpha plays for me to know at this point?
First off, I want to congratulate you for actually still having some of your budget left. Like that,
Oh, so hard. It
it
was so hard not to
it's
spend it.
like the number one thing that I tell people when they're like, I want to get into Sorare, and the sport doesn't even matter, is like have a plan before you start buying cards, because like I did it incorrectly where like I just bought a bunch of cards early on, and then you're like, I don't know what to do with these cards. Thankfully, like I had that experience before I got in the NBA. So it was like I knew what I wanted to do. But so yeah, it's like honestly, like it sounds like I'm joking, but that is already, you're already winning if you haven't just like spent it all.
Thank you.
And I think that the weird thing about the game is that what's dissimilar from soccer and baseball is that you can't just buy 5 cards and play, because if you buy a guy with an L10 of 5 and he has a huge game, now you can't play him next week when his L10 is 12, and so on.
Yeah.
But because of that, and because the way that a lot of people play this game is like they wait until close to the deadline and they're like, oh, I need a guy who averages 23, and so like let me go get or cheap guys. That even though it's the game that kind of sets the price of everything, I actually think the best way, if you want to look at playing the game as maximizing your returns, I think trading is actually the best way to do it. Of realizing whose L10 is going to be really attractive for the next game week, whether it's somebody who's like just coming back from injury or just hasn't played that much, and they're going to get like a lot of playing time.
Yeah.
Even if you see the price kind of going up by the time you figure it out, if it's before the deadline, you're ahead of a lot of people. And so I think the nice thing about this is that like, if you want to put in that work, you could be really successful. But I actually mentioned that on I think it was last week on our show here. I think it's actually a detriment to some people though, because playing the game well does require work. Like you can't just like go out and buy the 5 best cards and just like win every week. Like you do have to kind of get into the weeds of it. And I think that could turn some people off, because it's like all of a sudden you're trying to buy, you know, Dean Wade. Like I'm looking at my lineups of like guys that I literally had never heard of. And then all of a sudden I'm like doing my research and I'm like, Dean Wade looks pretty good. Why don't I own a Michael Green? And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why don't, but like, I do that because I want to play the game. And so I think if you can, like, as weird as it sounds, if you can streamline some sort of process, and part of that is hopefully using the tools that we have at SorareData. Like if you can streamline a process to identify players who are going to be huge beneficiaries of playing time, who don't usually play, I think you can really move up in this game. Because we saw it. I was talking to somebody last night. I think it was last night. James Harden went to the locker room, and all of a sudden people started posting his cards, and they were like undercutting each other, and people were buying them. And then he came back, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, but like, so in that situation, it's like, okay, if Harden gets hurt, you know, you can choose to like sell out of his cards, but like who's going to benefit playing time wise if Harden gets hurt? And if you are like quick enough with that thinking, you can just go out and buy whoever it is.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
And so it's like, I don't think there's one, like, this is what you need to do in order to be successful. I will say that from what I noticed with baseball, and baseball is like very new on Sorare as well. But if you see yourself eventually spending a lot of money on this game, you should like get the expensive cards now. Like if you think you're gonna play super rares and uniques, like get it now, because I think once there are more people who are playing, those cards become very, very like harder and harder to get.
Will there be more people playing? Because we had like this week, like in the, just look at some of the numbers. And this is actually probably the part I'm most curious about
Mhm.
is like common champion. You have almost 68,000 entries, but that's common since people haven't really spent any money. But limited contender, you still have like 5,300, limited champion 4,000, rare almost 2,000. Is that like so? Do you think those numbers grow over the season?
I do. I
Hmm.
do.
Okay.
I don't think Sorare has done anything to make everyone know that this exists. Like
Right.
the the announcement, it was a really cool video with Jay Williams and Carl Anthony
That's
Towns. Like that
awesome,
was really
man. Yeah,
cool.
that's dope. Yeah, I really
But it
like that.
also kind of just landed on a bunch of people who either knew about Sorare already or knew about NFTs.
Hmm.
And so there is I think there's a much bigger opportunity with people who play fantasy basketball. Like I
Yeah.
think um, there is it fits perfectly between the classic season long game and DFS, where
Hmm.
you kind of eliminate the headaches of DFS and you have a little more excitement each day or twice a week than you do with the season long game. And so I don't think they need to immediately be like go to NBA arenas and try to get all 25,000 people in attendance to go buy Sorare cards.
No,
But I
yeah.
think the next step is trying to convert like active fantasy basketball players, because the game is like fundamental to how the ecosystem works.
Yeah.
And like I don't think they're in a position to like say, hey, these are like cool collectibles and you should come in and buy them, because there really hasn't been like any history of that
No.
on Sorare for any sport.
Yeah.
And we see like the one ofs are popular and people will pay more for those, or jersey mints, but the collectability is not there. I say that as somebody who bought every Villanova player purely for collectibles. And but I think I'm a real like one off in when it comes to that. Although I
Yeah.
will say I've spoken to one other person who's collecting everyone who went to Duke, and that collection is much bigger than mine because it's just an NBA factory at that school. But I think like they just have to do it in stages. Like get more people who play fantasy basketball, and then you can get some more kind of um, real NBA nuts who like are just looking to enhance their NBA experience.
Hmm.
But I don't think there's going to be this like massive growth like immediately, as it happens, or excuse me, like in the next few weeks or months. But I do
Right.
think it continues to grow. Like I think I'm like clearly biased since I'm like deep in this, but I do think it's like
Yeah.
the best way to play fantasy basketball. And
I agree. Yeah, I
if
think
you
it's
can do
fantastic.
that, then
Yeah.
just like go after that audience first.
Right. Okay, makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so does that advice then like buy some of the more valuable cards early? Like does that apply to the rares, you think?
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of a weird
'Cause
thing
yeah.
with the scarcities, because they're different than soccer. And a lot of people
Mhm.
who are playing now played soccer. And
Right.
so fundamentally, like the NBA rare count is the same as the soccer limited account. And so you're like, well, they're not really as rare because there are 1,000 of them, but that kind of ignores that there are so many more soccer players than there are players in the NBA. That like there are, you're gonna have thousands and thousands of like rare
Yeah.
goalies, but like you're only
Yeah.
gonna have 1,000 rare LeBrons and Giannis and Jokic
Right.
each season.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
the only reason I say I like to buy the more scarce cards now is I don't think they're going to get through a full mint, or
So how's that work? So they cut it off at some point?
so they, I mean, they say, up to 1,000 rare cards and up to 100 super rares.
Right.
But looking at soccer, like they very rarely mint all 100 or all 1,000.
Okay.
And so what they did for baseball, so baseball launched at the All-Star game, which is
Yeah,
obviously halfway
midseason.
through the season. And
Yeah.
they were like, we're only going to mint up to half. And
Right.
based on the numbers now, like they're not going to get close. So maybe they do it with NBA, that they do mint like the full 1,000 rares and 5,000 limiteds. But
Mhm.
I don't think they're going to do that if the players are not, like if the the consumers are not there. Like that just hurts everything if you just have cards laying around for 2 cents.
Right.
And so the thing with the super rares and even the rares is that like fundamentally there's just not that many of them. Like in soccer, you know, yes, there are only so many guys who are as good as Mbappe or Neymar. But in the NBA, like it's really hard to find somebody that's the best if it's not Giannis, Doncic, or Jokic, and now John Morant's like trying to get in there. And so, like, I'm not here like tell people how to
any
spend their
given night
money.
in the NBA, there's a lot of guys who could put up like 15 to 20 points and put up
Exactly.
like five boards. You know,
Yes.
like that's a decent amount of players, and who can basically put up like 30 to 40 points in Sorare.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's like I do think that those people who have bought super rares early, and I think part of the reason that like those contests aren't even open yet. Like, or I guess they just opened super
The
rare.
super rare started last week.
Super rare started last week. So it just, I understand like the slow rollout, but I just think that people are waiting to see kind of like what happens in this game first. And like it took them forever just to bring out the limited champion. So like there were people early on who were like, oh yeah, I got Doncic. Where can I use them? And they're like, well, you can use them, but then you need, Kuminga, Dean Wade,
You
JaMychal
have to
Green,
fill out
and you're
a,
like,
a team of no names. Yeah.
You're like, that's not fun. But now that it's open, I think more people will just, I think it happens. And I've said this before, and part of it was it was a podcast that actually Nellis did talking about the NBA, that I think the upside of Sorare NBA is higher than Sorare football. And part of that is I think Sorare NBA has an easier path to becoming mainstream. That it could be at some point the most popular fantasy basketball game. And while that's like a pretty niche thing, like, but I think it's there. And it was something that somebody mentioned that like, what happens, and not to say that like you need this to happen, but like what happens if Drake buys somebody's unique and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, like what is this? And it's like we had like a few like random, like Gary V bought a few Sorare soccer cards, and that kind of started the whole thing. Yeah. And there are like professional players that play and like buy cards. But I think like that, like something as silly as like Drake buying and like people know him as like an NBA guy.
That's how things pump, man.
Right.
That's how things pump in the space.
And I don't even look at it as like, he buys it, oh, we're going to the moon. But like, it's just awareness. And people are like, oh, here's another thing that I can experience the NBA with. Let me look at what it is. And even if it's a ton of people just playing the free game, because like the free game is fun. Like, it's really well done.
That's one of the best parts, I'd say, is that I know a lot of guys who are just like, aren't really sure if they want to spend money, but they're enjoying just playing the free game, and they can, if they play well enough, they can win. You know what I mean? Like they can get some of that 1,000 limited cards, and if they do really well, it's like one of those might be worth a couple $100, right? Yeah. And then they can almost like reverse engineer their float, right? Where it's like you make a couple $100 after a couple contests from winning, from being in the top tier, then good, then you can actually sell those, or you just use those, right?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's really well done. I have extreme bitterness at how bad my common cards are, but I'll have to let that go.
How have you done this season?
So because I spent a decent part of my budget on these Villanova guys who are like, some are okay in the game, but like, so I have the limited, rare, and super rare one-ofs of Ryan Arcidiacono, who will be lucky to play like 12 minutes this season. So I would say I capped my upside a bit when it came to playing the game. But so like this upcoming week, like I'll have both commons, both limiteds, and like one rare. The rare, I'll probably play like contender. Like I'm not in the boat. Like I didn't buy Giannis, Jokic, or Doncic. Like the highest scoring card I have is Steph Curry. This current game week, actually, I'm trying to pull up. Like I picked up Paul George thanks to a suggestion from somebody because they're like, Kawhi's still out. You should pick up Paul George. And the guy bangs like an 80 something this week.
Oh, a huge week this week. Yeah, he had a huge game the other night. Yeah.
So like so in limited champion, like right now I can wear a rare tier 3. And I'm like, oh, I need another rare for my rare contender champion lineup. Like, and it just like helps me like progress there. So like I'm using the game as like how can I, like, I'm not trying to buy the best cards and just use them. Like I mean, obviously Steph Curry is a really good card, but like it got to the point where I was like, I think there are clear value differences in terms of like L10 average and where a guy is and the price. Like I got Durant like 3 days ago. I actually bought 2 of them kind of by accident. I did a classic thing. I don't know if you've done this. I put 2 auction bids in before I went to sleep, and I woke up and I'd won both of them, expecting to win neither of them.
I did do that a few times. I lost pretty often, but
yeah, it's so that, and it usually happens to me. And all of a sudden, it was like I woke up and it was like, "Congratulations, you won Kevin Durant," and I'm like, "Sweet." And then it was like, "Congratulations," and I was like, "Oh, I don't really need 2 of these," so I sold one, and the price is like doubled since I sold because he had like a huge game this week. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun in the game, and I'm hoping to get like some rewards. But like I think also like the more people that play, the harder it's going to be to win. So I think like if you're more competitive now, then you're going to be more competitive in the future. And one of the kind of it's not a strategy, but one of the aspects of Sorare that a lot of people talking about is snowballing rewards, where like you have one lineup and it does really well and you win a better card. So now all of a sudden your lineup's better for the next time and you can finish higher and you can win a better reward. And like just the more
like
that you can win now is going to help
winning,
you in the
basically.
future.
Yeah. That's just, that it kind of happened to me a little bit. Although I did well last week. Where I finished, let's see here. In the limited contender, I finished 260th out of 5,500.
Yeah.
So that gave me a tier 3 limited card. And in the rare contender, I finished 135. So also a rare tier 3 card.
Yeah, awesome.
Which is good. But then I got Jabari Smith Jr., which is like as my limited, which is good. Don't get me wrong, but it's also like he's a rookie, so it's like kind of inconsistent whether he's gonna like get a lot of points, even though his L10 is like huge. But still, like I was still like, okay, now I have, and I got Jalen McDaniels, who's been playing super well in Charlotte.
Sure.
So it's like, so it's for his L10, let's say. So it's like those are like, okay, cool, like that does help for sure, you know. So I agree with you there that it is nice. Like now, and that's actually why I've saved half my budget. I'm like, okay, I spent a good amount. I feel like I have some good cards who can like I can maybe at least win one new limited per week. That it's like it almost alleviates that. It's like, okay, maybe I won't spend too much, and I'll see what I can build this way, snowballing, see what I can do with my current lineup, and then in a couple weeks maybe reorganized a bit.
Yeah, and honestly, like if you're structured about that, there could be a situation where you're like, I have this really good lineup, but I need a guy who has an L10 of 8, but then there actually is someone who fits that mold for you, and they're supposed to score 20 this week. Like you can use your budget to like fill that lineup, as opposed to like if you spend everything right away, then you're kind of like stuck if you need a guy and you can't get him.
Got it. Yeah. Exactly.
Did you
here's a
consider
question.
selling the rewards at all?
I did think about it. Yeah. But I wasn't sure what I was going to buy with the money. Should I have sold the rewards?
There's no right or wrong answer to it. What's one of the things that is funny to watch with a lot of the guys who come from soccer, although this happens in soccer too, but the guys who like don't follow the NBA at all, and like that they went out and like bought the best guys that they could find.
Yeah,
it's basically Nellis. I don't know why I'm like trying to, but Nellis is like the perfect example of this.
Yeah.
That he like opens the reward and he's like, I have no idea who that is. Let me just find out how much I could sell it for. But like that's such a fundamental, like so rare thing that like if you're somebody who plays soccer and you like win some defender from like the Dutch league and you're just like, I have no idea who that is, but let me see if I can, let's see what it's worth. And like sometimes you get lucky and you're like, it's actually worth a lot of money and I can sell that and buy something that I want. But it's funny to see with the NBA, like I had heard of Jabari Smith Jr., but like I don't really know enough about him. And so like that would be a card for me, even that would be like, okay, what can I get for this? And if
Yeah,
it's
no,
like
that's
a
a good
decent
point.
price and you sell, and if not, then don't worry about it.
I mean, he's like, when they put out like potential rookie of the year ladders, like he's in the top 5 at least through the first like 2 weeks of games. So it's like, okay, he's not bad,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that's actually a good point. It's like, would I have gone out of my way to buy his card at the price it's going for? And maybe if it's like, even if the card is only going for like $30, it's like, well, is there anybody else I'd rather have for $30 than him?
So I
So
think
yeah,
that's
that's
actually
definitely a good consideration.
like a really big thing. And I don't know how well it's going to translate to NBA because of this scoring cap.
Right.
But fundamentally, like there are certain players cards who you want to acquire. You're like, this is my team, but like if I could turn this card into this one, then I would do that. And then you win. And if you don't win like a card that you are going to use or that it's just like not a card you would have ever considered buying, then like you can sell it. Like there's a market out there. And with Sorare, what we always say is like, we said it on last week's show, like you probably, because of the way the scoring cap works, that tier 5 rewards are probably guys who just don't play that much.
Yeah.
But in the NBA, sometimes things happen where those guys end up playing a lot. So we made this joke that like you should never sell tier 5 rewards for tier 5 prices. And like
for like $1. Yeah.
right, it's just not worth
Yeah.
it. Like
No,
the
you might as
$1
well
is not
keep
going to
it.
go far enough. Whereas if something happened, so and so gets hurt or somebody's like gets a night off, all of a sudden it's like this guy who averages 3 might score 24 in the next game, and if you have him because you want him, like don't sell that for $1.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense actually, the way you're putting it. Yeah. Because also I'm just looking at like even Jabari Smith, where it's like, the low ask on manager sales is like $29. So just thinking about it's like, okay, maybe I should go look at like who else is out there that I could buy for the same amount, or even what limited cards of like, are there like two guys I'd want that are like $12 and $18 or something like that, and just turn into other like, okay, these guys will be good plugs at different times, right? Or even sell it, because I'm not going to put him in my main lineups because he literally, is super inconsistent right now. So it's like, yeah, okay, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Andrew, I've got to go.
Yeah, no,
We only had an hour for this.
I've taken up a lot of your time. So
no, it's
thank
great. This has
you.
been a great chat.
Thanks for coming
Thank
on.
you
Thank
for
you
all
to
the
everybody
advice.
who joined us in the chat. It's always nice to get some comments there. Apologies that I didn't address it much, but I was talking LG Zero off here, so I was getting my questions in first. But no, thank you so much for coming on, and good luck with the Sorare journey, man.
Thanks, man, for sure. Might hit you up with some more questions at some point.
Happy to help.
Okay, thanks, man.